This week's Torah portion is Ki Tavo. We're dedicating it to the memory of Michael Stern, who was a giver. And we'll just share a few minutes and then we'll open it up. But I want to focus today at the beginning about the mitzvah of the Bikurim ceremony, which is in Parshas Ki Tavo, the mitzvah of the Bikurim ceremony. So let me just read the verses and then just talk a little bit about the Bikurim. It says, chapter 26, verse 1, and you'll be familiar with these verses because they also relate to the passage. This is the passage that we read at the Haggadah. Majority of the Haggadah on Seder night is taken from these verses and a midrash on these verses. So it says, Vayaki Tavo haaretz, when you come to the land, Asher Hashem Elokecha, no saying lecha, that God will give to you as an inheritance, nachala, v'rishtav yashavta ba, and then you'll inherit the land and you dwell there. You're going, once you inherit the land and you dwell there, you have the mitzvah of the Bikurim. Kachta merishit kol peri adama, and you shall take from the first of the fruits, asher tavi me'artzecha, that you bring from your land, asher Hashem Elokecha noten lach, that Hashem gave to you. So you have to take the first fruits, and the Talmud says, when you see the fruits begin to bud, you go down into the field, you take a string, and you tie it around the fruits. Not all the fruits. This applies only to the Shivat Haminin, the 7 species. The Sam Tavatena, you put the fruits in a basket. You can put them in whatever type of basket you wanted. Talmud says that the rich people put them in silver baskets or very fancy baskets, and the poor people put them in wicker baskets. And the Talmud says that as a result of this, the rich got richer and the poor got poorer, because it's like when you bring somebody a dish to their home, you potluck, whatever, you bring them a dish. If you bring it in your fancy china, you're going to take your china back with you. So the rich brought their silver baskets back home. But if you bring it in a Tupperware, not everybody has the chutzpah to say, can you give me my Tupperware back? Or in a tin pan. You're not going to ask for your tin pan back. So the poor people lost their wicker baskets. That's what the Talmud says. And you go to the place, Asher Yivchar Hashem Elokecha, V'shakein Shemo Sham. You go to the place that God will cause you to dwell there. That is to Jerusalem. Uvata Kohen Asher Yeh B'yamim Ha'im. You go to the priest that'll be in those days. And who will be all you have is the priest in those days. It tells you don't get to say, well, yeah, I wish I had a Kohen like the one from 100 years ago. That guy was good. No, you have to go to the Kohen. And you shall say to him, today I'm declaring before God, I came to the land that God has sworn to give to us. The Kohen shall take the basket from your hand, and shall place it before the altar. This is a very, very important point. This is the only offering that takes place in the temple where nothing is actually put on the altar. Nothing is sacrificed on the altar. It's all given as a gift to the Kohen. This is a very important point. If we have time, I'll share with you what I saw from the Lubavitcher Rebbe about that. V'anita, here the word vanita means you raise your voice. And you raise your voice and you shall declare before God. And this has to be said in Hebrew, according to the Talmud and Sota. You say it in the Hebrew language. And you say, Arami Oved Avi. So there's 2 ways to translate this verse. In the Haggadah, on Passover night, we translated it as, an Aramean tried to destroy my father. Some say it means my father was a wandering Aramean. Okay, it could be either one. Vayered Mitzrayma, and he went down to Egypt. Vayagar Shamim Temaat, he lived there few in numbers. Vayisham Lagoy Gadol Atzum Varav, and he became a great nation, numerous, strong and numerous. Vayareu Osanu HaMitzrim, and the Egyptians were very bad to us. Vayanunu, they afflicted us. Vayednu Aleinu Avodah Kasha, they afflicted us with a hard work. And we cried out to Hashem our God. God heard our voice. He saw our afflictions, our tremendous stress. God led us out of Egypt. biyad chazakah, with an outstretched arm, Zoran Netuyah, with a strong arm, outstretched arm, Marag Gadol v'totem of sin, with might and signs and wonders. He brought us to this place. And he brought us this land flowing with milk and honey. And he gave us this land. And now this verse. This verse is what I really want to focus on. We could really focus on the whole passage, but I want to focus on the beginning. Behold, I have brought these Reshit Priyadaman, the first of the lambs. Asher natatali Hashem, that God you gave me, v'inachto lefnei Hashem Elokecha, and I am placing them before Hashem your God. V'shtachavita lefnei Hashem Elokecha, you shall bow down before Hashem your God. V'samachta b'chol hatov, and you shall rejoice with all the good Asher nasancha Hashem Elokecha b'techa, that God has given you to your home, you and the Levite and the stranger. Atav Levi v'ager Hashem v'kerbecha. This is the mitzvah called the Bikurim. It's called the mitzvah of the Bikurim. The mitzvah that we're supposed to bring the first of our fruits to the Kohen, express our gratitude to Hashem for all that God has done for us. But nowadays, I remember many years ago, when I was first moved to town, I was really a young rabbi, I wasn't even 30. We had a fruit tree, and this fruit tree was so beautiful. It's producing these beautiful persimmons. And it just didn't seem right to me that the fruit tree was producing these persimmons, and we weren't acknowledging the spirituality of the moment. So I went to a rabbi, a senior Rosh Yeshiva in the area, and I met with him and I said, am I allowed to just tie a string around this and say, this is a reminder to me of the Bikurim ceremony? And he said, technically speaking, as long as I use the proper language, it's not prohibited, but it also is not really the spirit. You're not allowed to say something that it is when it's not. You can't take, like, for example, he cited me for me, the Talmudic passage. You can't take a quince and say it's an etrog. You can't pretend. You can't pretend. But that being said, the Talmud does say, he didn't cite this to me, and if I would go back and have the conversation with him, I would have cited this Talmudic passage to this tremendous scholar and very good, very good spiritual mentor at that time. I would have cited to him this passage which says, from the Talmud, that nowadays, the Talmud states, and we're going to get to this passage in Ketubot 107, when we're going to come later on. We're studying the Daf Yomi, and this is the tractate we're studying, tractate Kesubos. And the Talmud says, nowadays, when we no longer have a temple, if somebody brings a gift to a Talmid Chacham, if somebody brings a gift to a scholar, it's as if one made an offering of the Bikurim in the temple. So nowadays, what this means to me is that nowadays, where we no longer have Bikurim ceremony, we no longer have the temple, and also many of us are not living in the land of Israel, although this is on our YouTube channel and everybody should subscribe to our YouTube channel, but we can still fulfill kind of shadow of the mitzvah. We're not fulfilling the mitzvah, but we're fulfilling, let's say, the spirit of the mitzvah by giving a gift. In this case, the Talmud says a gift to a Torah scholar. So this got me thinking that we should probably talk about today a little bit of the power of giving, of how we give, and just the spirituality of giving. By the way, there's a tremendous spirituality to giving, but there's also a spirituality to receiving. It's actually, for me, much easier to give than it is to receive. I know some people find it easier to receive. I always find it easier to give than to receive. And this reminds me of another Talmudic passage, which I wrote down here. Let me just make sure I have this passage proper. But it states there's an idea, there's a concept. There's the concept called, in when it comes to giving, it's that somebody who gives a gift to a distinguished person, the person who gives the gift, it's as though they're getting a gift. That's the concept, because the fact that a distinguished person accepts a gift from you, you get benefit. You get benefit. This is the Gemara in Kedushin Daf Lamed. So that's for another time. Although some connected to the Mitzvah of Bikurim, I saw this teaching by the Nachal Kedumim. He says he connects it to the Mitzvah of Bikurim because he said that the Torah says vilakachta, that you are, by giving this, you are taking, because by giving this gift to the Kohen, you are taking a gift from Hashem, because the giver of the gift is really the one who feels who's getting a gift. Just anybody who gives a gift properly just feels this incredible high. There's like very few things in life you can get that's as uplifting as giving a gift to somebody who needs it, and you see what you really do to help that person. So that's a separate aspect, but the spirituality of giving is so important. How you give, the way you give. So I just want to say, first of all, I saw on Shabbos afternoon in our yeshiva, after we daven mincha, we sit down in our base medrash and we share some Hasidic stories. So this week, I saw 3 stories by Rav Zevin, Rav Shlomo Yosef Zevin, one of the greatest scholars of the 20th century. And he wrote a book about the Hasidic tales on the Parsha. And I saw 3 tales which he wrote, which I want to share with you very briefly, all about how modern day people tried, we're giving in the Hasidic context. So the first was, he tells the story of Rabbi Mordechai of Navorno. I see my friend George on this call. George and I used to talk about just the importance of doing a mitzvah. Just the importance of doing a mitzvah. Like, you put your whole heart and soul into doing a mitzvah. It's just, there's nothing like it. So Mordechai of Navorno was just desiring deeply to do the mitzvah of Bikurim. And he knew that you can't do it anymore today because we don't have a temple. So there's no Kohen there that you could give it to. So what he did was, where was he living? He was living in, I assume Galicia, but check me out on that. So what did he do? He bought a lamb. And he knew this passage, obviously, from the Gemara, which says that you can fulfill the mitzvah of giving Bikurim today by bringing a gift to a Torah scholar. So he took a lamb, he bought a lamb, he slaughtered the animal and distributed the meat to the poor. And he took the wool and he tied the wool himself. He spun the wool into strings of tzitzit. Spun the wool into strings of tzitzit, and then he hired a special messenger and he personally sewed the tzitzit into a package, and then he sent it to the Reb Chaim of Tzantz. Can you imagine the love that he felt for Reb Chaim of Tzantz, and he wanted to do this mitzvah of giving him this gift? And when he sent this gift to Reb Chaim of Tzantz, he said this was in fulfillment of the mitzvah of giving Bikurim, like the temple times. And when Reb Chaim got it, he said he was so moved by this, he not only personally untied it, he saved the paper it was wrapped in. He said the paper was called Tashmishe Kedusha. It was helping along to preserve the holiness. So that was one person's story about the desire to give. And then I'll just give you one other story that we saw from him. from Rabbi Shlomo Zevin, Yosef Zevin shared 3 stories. I'll only share 2 of the ones because the other story, the third one, it actually is complicated. And sometimes when you share a complicated story in this context, it won't work. If you want to look at the exact story, you'll look in the Hasidic Tales on the Parsha by Rabbi Zevin. But the third story is that the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, he was going to Israel in 1929. And on his way, he was passing through Egypt. So when his train came up to the railway station, at that moment, here he is in Alexandria, Egypt, in 1929. All of a sudden, the door of his carriage burst open, and a man leaped inside. Can you imagine? And this man's arms were filled with a basket of exotic fruit, and his eyes were tears of joy were flowing down his eyes. And he said, Rebbe, why am I here? He said, when I was a little boy, I was maybe 6 or 7, and my grandfather took me to visit your grandfather, Reb Shmuel of Lubavitch. And we wanted to get a bracha from him. And my grandfather brought the Rebbe a basket of fruits as a kind of Bikurim, the first of the fruits of his farm. And you, my Rebbe, you were also playing at that time in the study. And when your grandfather, Reb Shmuel of Lubavitch, received the gifts, he said to my grandfather, he said, I give you the bracha that one day your grandson will bring a gift to my grandson. And so at that time, he said, there were many, many years passed from then. But then when I heard your train was coming through the city, I said, I'm going to go and rush to bring it. And so therefore, I'm rushing to bring you the fruit. It's the fulfillment of Reb Shmuel's bracha. You see what this is to me? This is somebody who's waiting his whole life to give a gift. He's waiting his whole life to give a gift. And then when I saw those stories about giving, and the art of giving, the passion for giving, the gift of giving, really to give is such an inspiration. Then we saw yesterday in the passage of the Talmud was the daf, the page. There are 2,711 pages in the Shas, and yesterday's page was all about how to give, who to give to, and how to give. So first of all, the Talmud starts by saying that when the person is, there's a few stories from the Talmud, and some of them are very controversial. We'll just share some of these stories from the Talmud. And so it says that if a person is lacking money, how much money do you have to give him? How much money do you have to give to a poor person who's in need of charity? So the Talmud tells us that you have to give this poor person dei machsaro, asher yachasar. You have to give him that which he is lacking, which he is lacking. And the Talmud tells a story, and not required to make him rich, but if he's lacking honor, you have to give him honor. So the Talmud says, "Afilu sus l'erkovolav ve'eved larutz lefanav." You even have to give him a horse to ride upon and a servant to run before him. You even have to give him a servant. So the Talmud tells a story of Hillel the elder. Now Hillel the elder was not known for his wealth, certainly not when he was younger. We know the story that he put his ear to the roof because he couldn't even gain admission into the school to listen. Remember that story with Hillel in the snow? He couldn't even listen. He couldn't even get in. So he was not wealthy. This man came to him and said that he needs a horse to ride on, and he needs also somebody to run before his horse because he was used to that. So Hillel hired someone, gave him a horse, and he hired someone to run before him. But then one day, you hire people to do a job, they don't always show up. So Hillel had that responsibility, and Hillel ran before him. Hillel was running before him. So I heard, sometimes I listen to, it's called the daily raid of a tremendous Maggid shir on, he gives a shir on the daf. His name is Reb Shmuley Borenstein. I listen to him sometimes. It's tremendous. Whenever I get an opportunity, it's great. And he said at the end of his shir on this, he gave Vort. He cited Reb Chaim Shmulevitz. Reb Chaim Shmulevitz said, he asked the question, how could Hillel the Elder do this? We say a Torah scholar is not allowed to diminish their honor and respect. And here he is running through the streets like a servant. How is this an honor to the Nasi, to the prince? This is, can you imagine if, let's say the head of the Jewish community is running through the streets like a common worker? It's not respectful. So Chaim Shmulevitz said, yeah, it's true, it wasn't respectful, but you're allowed in Jewish law, if it's a matter of life and death, you're allowed to violate Jewish law. And he said this was a matter of life and death. And he said sometimes when it comes to honor and glory, a person doesn't have the honor and the glory, it could take them out of this world. And it is true. This is not just like a vort. People sometimes get so worked up to have honor that if, let's say, you hear stories that if they lose their job or they lose their position of importance, that they feel like their life has no meaning. And so this was a matter, Hillel felt that to give this man this gift was a matter of saving his life. Sometimes when you give a gift to somebody, you can actually save their life. That was what Hillel the Elder was doing. Then Talmud tells another story. This actually supports that, because the next story here in the Talmud was that there was a story where a person came to Rabbi Nehemiah, and the person came to the rabbi and he said, "What do you eat every day?" And Rabbi Nehemiah asked him, "What you eat every day?" And the man said, "Well, I eat fatty meat and old wine." And so Rabbi Nehemiah said, "Well, I eat lentils. So why don't you eat lentils with me?" And he said, so the man ate the lentils, and next thing you know, it says he died. The man died. So Rabbi Nehemiah said, he said the following. The expression is, "Oilo lazeh shargo Nehemiah." Woe to this man that Nehemiah killed him. So the Talmud said he should have said, "Woe to Nehemiah that you killed this man." And Talmud said, Don't exaggerate. This man, he took it upon himself. Nehemiah could have been given differently, but let's not get carried away. This man also shouldn't have been so extreme in saying he needs to eat fatty meat and old wine when he could have sufficed with lentils. So the Talmud is saying here that it's complicated, basically. And not every case needs to be looked at in its unique manner, in a unique way. I just share with you two more stories from this page. This whole page of Ksubo 67b is so outstanding. I mean, every page of Talmud is outstanding, but you can really spend just a long time, much longer time studying it in depth. And if you want to study it in depth, you come to our share tomorrow night by Rav Betzal, Tuesday night at 8, where he's going to discuss this in depth. An amazing teacher. But the Talmud tells us that there's a story about Mar Ukva, two very well-known stories about Mar Ukva. I'll just share these stories, and then I'll just pause the recording. So the first story about Mar Ukva was that Mar Ukva there was a man, he used to give him money every day by pushing it through the door of his man's house, and then he would run away before the man could find out who it was. So one day Mar Ukva went to the study hall with his wife. Not sure why his wife was at the study hall. The Talmud doesn't tell us. But he was at the study hall with his wife, and then on the way back, Mar Ukva wanted to give this man some money. But the man wanted to know who was giving him money every day. So when Mar Ukva came close and he poured the bag through the door, the man opened the door to try and catch Mar Ukva and see who he was helping him. Mar Ukva and his wife ran away, and they ran into an oven. I guess it was a big oven, but the fire was out, but the floor was still hot. And Mar Ukva's feet were burning. And his wife said, put your feet on top of mine because my feet are not burning. And so Mar Ukva saw his wife her feet were miraculously not burning. So he was cholash libe. He was upset. Why is my wife meriting this? There must be something wrong with the way I'm giving. So he asked her, what's the difference? She said, first of all, I'm always in the house. So the poor people know they could always come to me if they want something. And also I give them ready-made food. You give them money, they have to go to the marketplace to get the food. I guess she was running like a soup kitchen. So the hana was kriva. The benefit was closer for the people I'm giving. There was something different about the way she was giving, which made her gift better than Mar Ukva's. And maybe because yes, it's true, and that anonymity is a very powerful thing, that you don't want the person to know who you're giving it to. It's powerful, but it's also can be, I guess, it wasn't as pure because Mar Ukva was getting something out of it as well. He was benefiting, that he felt this a little bit, I guess you could say maybe a little self-righteous. Chas v'shalom, I would say that about such a great sage, but his gift was not as great as his wife's. Maybe because he was also getting benefit by giving it anonymously. Then Talmud tells us another story about Mar Ukva, which is a very, very powerful story to me. That Mar Ukva used to send his son every Erev Yom Kippur. Every Erev Yom Kippur, Mar Ukva would give 400 zuz to a man, a poor man. 400 zuz is an enormous amount of money back then. And one Erev Yom Kippur, he sent his son to give the money. The son came hurrying home. And the son, and he said, no, he doesn't need it. So Mar Ukva said, what did you see? He said, I saw him using wine as a fragrance for the house. He was taking old wine, and they used to sprinkle the wine as a fragrance for the house. So, this was a delicacy. This man was a fine, he had refined tastes. And so I see him using this wine. So Mar Ukva said, oh, you see, he has such sensitive needs that he needs to use this wine as a fragrance. How much more so? We need to give him double. And he sent back his son to give him double. So that's another powerful story, is that sometimes a person might seem like it's an extreme case, but everything is complicated. Because then the next story in the Talmud is that Rabbi Hanina saw that there was a man who was only eating on gold and silver tablecloths, and he said, no, this man is a fraud. We shouldn't be giving him, basically. So every case is complicated, but I think the Talmud is talking about the spirituality of giving. It's such a powerful, especially when it comes to charity, the concept of intent is really, really, really important. Even though it's important by all commandments, especially by tzedakah, it's so intent, the concept of intent when it comes to giving. Let me just pause the recording. Hold on.